I never imagined the sound of honor breaking could be so quiet. The lights inside the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes were warm and golden, casting long reflections across polished floors, and I stood at attention in my dress uniform, my brother's old field watch strapped against my wrist. I had been called here to receive the Bronze Star, a moment that was supposed to close one chapter of my service and let me breathe at last. Then the screen behind the podium flickered to life. It was not part of the ceremony. There was no announcement, no warning, just a grainy fragment of battlefield footage stitched into a lie. The image showed me turning away in the dust of Afghanistan, a cut designed to condemn me. No radio calls, no context, no truth, only the suggestion that I had abandoned my post and left soldiers to die. The room froze, 100 uniforms stiffened. But no one moved. My name, moments from being carved into record, curdled on every tongue. I heard something fall. It was the metal in the presenter's hand, slipping to the floor with a dull ring of metal. That small sound felt louder than gunfire. In that moment, I understood. The enemy I had spent years hunting was never out on the other side of a rifle. It was here, inside these walls, dressed in the same colors I once trusted with my life. If you have ever fought a battle no one believed you were fighting, stay with me. This is not a confession. It is a reclaiming. I will not ask for pity. I have worn silence like armor, and it nearly killed me. Subscribe if you believe every veteran deserves more than a folded flag. Here, our voices are finally heard. I was not born into a family. I was bred into a lineage. My earliest memories are not of lullabies or birthday candles, but of creased uniforms hanging on oak hooks and the hiss of my father's razor at 0500. Our house did not echo with laughter. It carried cadence calls and silence measured in ranks. My grandfather flew missions in the Second World War, a decorated pilot who never spoke of fear, only duty. My father, an Air Force colonel, inherited his discipline but none of his warmth. And my brother Michael, the golden son, chose the Marines as if he had been born already marching. By the time I arrived, the family myth had already been written. My name was not etched into it. I was simply the witness. Michael was older by 9 years. In every picture, he stood sharp as a knife, all shoulders and steady eyes. Even when we were children, other parents would stop and say, "That boy will be something." Our mother would glow, our father would nod once, the closest thing he ever gave to praise. When those same people looked at me, their words softened. Quiet girl, bookish, sweet. My father never said it aloud, but I heard it anyway. One air, one afterthought. Michael shipped out to Iraq when I was 15. The night before he left, I found him sitting on the porch steps, polishing his watch. It was standard issue, scratched at the edges, ticking strong and steady. He fastened it back onto his wrist and looked at me. "You do not have to wear the uniform to carry the weight," he said, "but you do have to choose what you are willing to carry." I did not understand him then. I was too young to know that the heaviest burdens are not strapped to your back, they are stitched under your skin. When the Marines came to our door a year later, my mother collapsed before they spoke. My father did not move. The officer's cap stayed on his head. Even as they handed him the flag, they told us Michael was gone, ambushed, a blown convoy, no survivors. They said the words with practiced solemnity, watching our faces for breaks. My mother sobbed, my father nodded. I stood still. I counted the stitches on the folded flag to stay upright. I remember one detail more than any other, his watch. They returned it. It had stopped. 14:27, 2:27 p.m. I do not know when that second froze. But it never moved again. My father tucked it away in a drawer and slammed it shut, as if he could close time by force. That night, I stole it. Slid it under my pillow like a relic. I wore it every day after that, even when it pinched my wrist. It did not matter that it was broken. It mattered that it had been his. People think grief makes families cling together. They are wrong. Grief in a house built on discipline becomes a quiet war. My mother disappeared into churches and casserole dishes. My father retreated into protocol, rewriting the past in polished words. He did not speak Michael's name. He erased it like a failed mission. One night, while he sat in his study, I gathered the courage to ask the question I had carried since the flag arrived. "What happened over there?" He didn't look up. "That's not your concern," but it was a concern, obsession, a buzzing under my skin that would not leave me. I needed to know who my brother had been in those final seconds, whether he was afraid, whether he was alone, whether someone had failed him. I went to his grave and promised him I would find the missing pieces. I made that vow without understanding its cost. I enlisted the week after graduation. Not Air Force, not Marines, Army. It was the only branch my father had never worn, the only uniform untouched by his shadow. When I told him, he stood silent for a long moment, arms crossed. Your brother was the soldier. You just analyzed things. I could have told him the truth. That analysis is the blade that finds weakness. That intelligence is the art of seeing what others refuse to admit, that I was not joining to fight a war, but to investigate one. Instead, I swallowed the words. I let him believe I chose safety. That belief would serve me better. Military intelligence is not glamorous. It is maps, data, intercepts, whispered fragments gathered from men with trembling hands. Most soldiers chase warfare. I chase discrepancies. I learned to read silence, to find patterns between casualty reports and classified dispatches. Every page I touched, I looked for one thing. 1427. Was it noted? Was it marked? Was there evidence that someone had lied? The first time I held a top-secret file, my fingers trembled, not from fear but recognition. I had found the same phrasing used in my brother's death notification. Almost identical, cut and paste. Corporate condolence. How many families had been handed the same ghost story? When I graduated from the intelligence school, my father did not attend. My mother sent a card signed, "Proud of you." He sent nothing. I did not expect him to. I had already given his approval to the dead. My first assignment brought me to Fort Bragg. The day I arrived, summer heat shimmered over the tarmac. The base pulsed with fatigue and pride, soldiers moving like gears in a machine older than all of us. I wore my uniform like a shield, not to hide behind, to hold myself together. That was where I met Colonel Malcolm Davis. He found me before I found him. I was studying a bulletin board, scanning deployments. When I heard a voice behind me, Brooks, I thought that name sounded familiar. He had the posture of someone who believed in his own permanence. Eyes sharp, smile thin. He offered his hand. Your father and I served together in Ramstein, hell of an officer, real man of honor. He held my hand 1 second too long. Let us see if it runs in the family. There are compliments that feel like threats. He was one of them. That night in my barracks room, I unstrapped my brother's watch. I listened to nothing. Silence from the past. Silence from my father. Silence now from the man who held my future like a coin he might flip. I set the watch on the dresser and stared at it. No ticking, no mercy. I made myself a promise. I may wear a broken watch, but I would not live a broken truth. People think loyalty is automatic in families like mine. It is not. Loyalty in the military is earned, tested, sometimes lost, but loyalty to the truth. That is forged piece by piece in every betrayal we refuse to ignore. If you are still here, I will tell you how I learned that some truths can only be uncovered when someone tries to bury them. And yes, someone would soon try. Colonel Davis assigned me to his tactical analysis unit within a week. It was not a gesture of welcome. It was placement, intentional. I was told to report at 0600, no questions asked. His office smelled faintly of leather and antiseptic, decorated with framed commendations, a command photo with my father in the background, and a single, polished saber mounted above his desk. He never addressed my brother, never said condolences. He addressed lineage. You come from warriors, Captain. Honor that. Do not overthink it. Overthinking, that was his word for intelligence. I learned quickly that in his presence, silence was safer than correctness. I let him underestimate me. It is a strategy no one teaches, but every woman in uniform learns. Let them dismiss you. They reveal more when they believe you are irrelevant. Most officers enter a room and identify threats. I entered and cataloged omissions. Files left open, email drafts unsent, glances that lasted a beat longer than protocol allowed. Davis favored a culture of unspoken rules. Soldiers under him did not speak out of turn. Staff did not challenge timelines, and no one asked about retracted mission reports. He placed me on logistics and after-action reviews buried beneath numbers. I processed casualty data and equipment discrepancies, a role others found tedious. I found it surgical. Patterns are the only honest language in a corrupted system. I saw one immediately. 3 missions, all logged under Davis, reported identical phraseology, complications under fog of war, casualties listed without cause, officers rotated before inquiry. The same wording is used in my brother's report, almost word for word. One afternoon, Davis approached my desk, glanced at my screen, and tapped a line with his finger. Repeatability, Captain. The Army likes consistency. Do not confuse repetition with deceit. His eyes did not blink. He turned and left. I did not respond, but my pulse thudded in my wrist, pressing against the broken watch. 14:27. I began printing everything, quietly. Copies hidden inside my PT bag, files labeled innocuous names. If I was going to uncover the mechanism, I would need evidence before it could be erased. Outside of duty, I ran alone on the perimeter track. Sunrise at Fort Bragg is not gentle. It arrives like an order. Soldiers passed in drives of adrenaline and exhaustion. No one noticed the woman on the far lane, pacing grief like an unfinished sentence. The watch on my wrist pulled at me, heavy as a vow. I started timing my runs to it. I would pause at exactly 2:27 p.m. every day, stand still, let the world move without me. I believed then that I was honoring Michael. In truth, I was freezing myself beside him. People imagine that those in uniform form instant camaraderie. That is a myth, especially for women. We are not given belonging. We must prove utility before we earn invisibility. True inclusion requires something more dangerous, a mistake from them, a choice from us. I kept my circle small. Staff Sergeant Maria Torres was the only one I trusted. She was older, sharp as coiled steel, with eyes that missed nothing. She had served under Davis longer than anyone. One evening, as I left the building, she fell into stride beside me without introduction. "You are looking for something," she said. Not approval, answers. It was not a question. I nodded once. She exhaled smoke into the humid air. "Careful, around here answers cost more than loyalty." I met her gaze. Loyalty to what? She studied me for another beat, then walked away. No friendship, just acknowledgement, but meaning lives in what is unspoken. That was the first real warning I received. At night, I dreamt of sand and silence, not combat, absence, a corridor of doors I could not open. Each locked by a single phrase, "Not your concern." I woke sweating, fists clenched. I would stare at the watch, unblinking, waiting for the second hand to jolt. It never did. One Sunday, my father called. It had been months since we spoke. I considered letting it ring out. I answered. I heard only breathing on the other end. Then, "Brooks, men do not chase ghosts. The dead are gone. Let them rest." He waited. I remained silent. The line went dead. He did not call back. It is an odd thing, realizing a parent sees you as disloyal. Not rebellious, disloyal. It is a condemnation that feels like exile. But families like mine do not exile with words. They exile with silence, a void you are expected to fill with obedience. I chose something else. A briefing was scheduled for late September. Davis led, officers only. Topic: assessment of classified operations in eastern Afghanistan. The kind of meeting where truths are curated. I was not invited. I inserted myself, not out of arrogance, calculation. When I entered, conversation dipped. Davis paused mid-sentence, glanced at me, then continued. I stood against the far wall, clipboard in hand, the silent note-taker. Invisible, useful, charts projected against the wall summarized missions with surgical vagueness. I recognized numbers, dates, Kunar province, the same sector where Michael had died. My lungs held painfully still. As Davis spoke, a phrase repeated. High-risk theater, mitigated discrepancies. The room nodded. Compliance disguised as competence. I wrote it down. After the briefing. As officers filed out, Davis remained. "You have your father's stubbornness, Captain. He knew when to keep truth buried." He stepped closer. "That is what separates honor from chaos, understanding what must remain unsaid." His meaning was clear. Truth was secondary to order, and order to legacy. That night, I sat on my barracks floor surrounded by files. The weight of them pressed against my chest. If I pushed further, I would move beyond investigation, into accusation. A line no one crosses without consequence. I thought of Michael, of his laughter in the kitchen, boots unlaced, showing me how to tie a tourniquet on a dish towel. "You never run from a wound," he had said. "You stop the bleeding or someone dies." A question formed. What if silence was the wound? It became the moment I knew I would not turn back. I slipped the watch from my wrist and held it flat in my palm. The minute hand, the hour, frozen, but the glass reflected my eyes. I whispered into the stillness, "I am not here to bury you. I was here to resurrect him." Some truths do not die, they are smothered, and every buried truth waits for one person willing to dig with bare hands. If you have followed this far, understand. What happened next was not discovery. It was a confrontation, not with enemies abroad, but with the guardians of a mythology designed to outlive us all. My name is Captain Aaron Brooks. This is the moment the bloodline broke. Fort Bragg greeted me not with a salute but with indifference. It is a place where warriors are forged and forgotten in the same breath. To the world, it is a symbol of strength. To those of us who live inside it, it is a labyrinth of unspoken hierarchies. As an intelligence officer, I learned quickly that rank does not guarantee respect, not when your collar bears bars instead of combat ribbons. They called me the captain with clean hands. I heard it first in the mess hall. 2 infantry officers sat behind me, whispering loud enough to be overheard. Desk captain, queen of paperwork, sounds like she's never tasted dirt. I kept eating, spoon steady, eyes ahead. You learn not to flinch when men need to test your silence. Sometimes it is not an insult, it is reconnaissance. They want to see what breaks you before the battle does. Colonel Davis never corrected them. If anything, he nurtured it. A subtle tilt of his head when someone joked about analysts. A deliberate omission of my recommendations during briefings. He praised aggressors, he tolerated thinkers, and yet he kept me close. Why, some men do not fear their enemies, they fear the ones who know where their masks begin. I lived in repetition, reports, rotations, classified briefings that said nothing and concealed everything. I memorized operational codes in Afghanistan, doctrines on threat deterrence, cultural matrices of tribal conflict, numbers, coordinates, data points, and beneath it all, silence. Occasionally, I saw my reflection in polished glass. I looked like an officer, ribbon bar neat, boots scuffed just enough to pass inspection. But if you stood close, you'd see it. I was wound like a wire. Every breath is measured. Every pause is deliberate. You cannot carry a question as long as I had and relax. Truth hunts you from the inside. One morning, during a training assessment, we ran a full field simulation, the kind designed to break egos. Alpha Team was tasked with advancing an assault through mock urban terrain. Bravo Team, led by Sergeant Owens, would ambush with simulated IEDs. My role was observation, analysis, eyes on the map, pen in hand, non-combatant, or so they assumed. I noticed it minutes before it happened. A blind corner, exposure on the left flank. Standard doctrine says push right. But Owens was not standard. If I could see it, he could see it. Predictability is the first casualty in asymmetric warfare. I tried to signal Captain Reeves, who led Alpha. He brushed it off. It is training, Brooks. Relax. I did not relax. I stepped forward. Alpha was seconds from walking into a pincer play. Reeves raised a fist to halt me. I ignored it. I shouted, left flank breach. Redeploy now. Confusion rippled. But soldiers trust commands in crisis, even from ghosts. They shifted. At that exact moment, Owens' team struck, but they hit empty ground. Smoke flares lit up positions where men had stood seconds earlier. Reeves stared at me. He knew I had seen something he hadn't. Later, during debrief, the room buzzed with adrenaline, men replaying fake kills like glory reels. Davis entered, slow and deliberate. He reviewed the board, casualty counts, debrief notes. Then he looked at me. You just got lucky, Captain, not praise, enforcement. Luck has no agency, no merit, no respect. It erases skill. It dismisses instinct. It tells the room I had stumbled, not perceived. I nodded, expressionless. I had learned another rule. Skill invites rivalry. Luck invites dismissal. Sometimes invisibility is the better camouflage, but invisibility does not conceal everything, not if you know where to look. And Colonel Davis had overlooked one thing. I analyzed more than missions. I analyzed language. There was phrasing in his after-action reports, repeated, sanitized, complications under fog of war. Losses deemed non-preventable. Unconfirmed insurgent engagement, identical syntax, 3 separate operations, 2 continents apart. I searched archived logs. I found casualty lists that did not align with field logs submitted by lower command, numbers missing, survivors listed as killed, killed listed as missing, and missing listed as nothing at all. War does not frighten me, erased names do. I tried official channels first, protocol before panic. I prepared a discrepancy memo for the inspector's office. Concise, unaccusing, strictly observational. I attached file ID, mission codes. I submitted it through an encrypted channel. 3 days later it was gone, not flagged, not denied, deleted, as if it had never existed. I checked submission logs, no trace. I inquired, no record. That was when I understood the system was not ignoring me, it was consuming me. I was careful after that. I documented privately. Not out of paranoia, out of pattern. Some truths are too fragile to risk once. You must place them in multiple hands or hide them where no hand can reach. I kept running, every day at 2:27, sun or rain. Soldiers assumed it was my training ritual. It was not. It was communion. A minute spent in the suspended time of Michael's watch, a vow renewed. I will not let you vanish, but grief can narrow your vision. I knew my brother's name. I did not yet understand the others, those who were casualties twice, first in war, then on record. Fort Bragg hosted a ceremony that fall, a memorial roll call. I attended alone. Names echoed through the courtyard. Bell chime. Silence. The dead do not speak. The living rarely answer. Afterwards, I lingered near a line of Gold Star families, mothers clutching pictures, wives holding folded flags. One woman's frame caught my eye, her son, Lance Corporal, same last deployment date as Michael. I stepped closer. She noticed my stare. "Do you know him?" she asked. "Only his name." She nodded, eyes rimmed in red. "They said he was killed protecting a convoy, but the letters from his unit, they conflict. They never told us exactly." She hesitated. "Someone always knows. They just do not say. Someone always knows." I drove back to base in silence. Her words sat beside me like cargo. I parked, sat in the dark. I pressed the frozen watch to my sternum. Two things I learned in the Army: how to follow orders and how silence can bury the truth. That night, a directive was issued across command: officer reassignment postings, deployment orders. I scanned the list. My name was there. I was being deployed to Afghanistan. I went to Davis the next morning, requested clarification. Tactical intelligence attachment to Forward Command, Kunar Province, effective immediately. He signed the document without looking at me. "You wanted to prove yourself, Captain. Now you will have the chance. Let us see if your hands stay clean." It was not an opportunity. It was removed. He was sending me to the same soil where my questions had begun. The war my brother never left, but he mistook my motive. I was not afraid of dirt. Before departure, I returned to my barracks. I opened the drawer. The watch lay inside, silent. I fastened it to my wrist. It pinched harder than before, or maybe my skin had thinned. 14:27, no movement. When I boarded the aircraft, I glanced back. The runway shimmered in heat. I did not salute. I had not earned farewell, and no one offered it. Afghanistan is not another world. It is the mirror held too close, where you see not what you are, but what you hide from. I did not fear what I would face there. I feared what I might uncover. If you are still with me, understand this. A lie buried under war does not stay buried. All it takes is one set of eyes refusing to look away. I was no longer just looking. I was ready to confront. Deployment does not feel like departure. It feels like erasure. You fold your life into a rucksack, seal it, and leave behind whatever proof existed that you were once known. I sat on the transport plane among soldiers who slept with their mouths open, boots hanging loose, helmets cradled in their laps like heavy thoughts. No one asked why an intelligence officer was ordered forward instead of embedded analysts stationed safely at HQ. In war, movement is assumed to have reason. Only later do you learn that sometimes movement is punishment. As we touched down in Bagram, heat hit like breath from an oven. The air tasted of dust and jet fuel, stale as a lie told too often. Trucks lined the tarmac, engines growling, each marked with unit numbers. The driver assigned to retrieve me glanced at my rank and shrugged. "Captain, rooms ready in green zone. Try not to get lost." We drove in silence through concrete barriers and razor wire. Forward operating base. The kind of place where clocks meant nothing but distance from last contact. My quarters were cramped, cot, footlocker, metal table with a cracked mirror hanging over it. I dropped my duffel. The watch on my wrist sat like a stone. 14:27. By evening, I reported to tactical intel. The acting lead, Major Henson, skimmed my orders, raised an eyebrow. "Thought you analysts preferred swivel chairs." He smirked, then pointed at a blacked-out wall map of the Kunar province. Bright red pins marked recent insurgent sightings. "You came under request, not mine. Colonel Davis, DC liaison to our command. He must think you see something we don't." He was wrong. I saw what they refused to. Days settled into a rhythm of intercepted radio chatter, drones buzzing overhead, and ground patrol debriefs thick with sweat and understatement. I read mission logs coded with ambiguity. Hostile neutralized, civilian presence undetermined, enemy movement suspected, language designed to satisfy oversight, not truth. There is a specific temperature to war in Afghanistan. Day burns, night freezes, but the real cold comes from the things left unsaid. I started crossing out words in reports, replacing them with what I believed really happened. Ambiguous engagement replaced with potential misfire. Enemy combatant replaced with unidentified casualty. I could not prove it, not yet, but patterns deepen when examined under repetition. I was trained to see what repetition tries to hide. 2 weeks in, I joined a patrol briefing out of necessity. Boots on the ground provide what screens cannot. Staff Sergeant Kane, leader of Bravo Squad, gave me a look that suggested analysts rarely left tense. You ever step on hard dirt, Captain, or just plot it on a map? I answered without pause. I follow the dead. Wherever they stop, I stand. He studied me for half a beat, then nodded. Fair enough. We moved into the Korangal Valley, thick pines. Rocky ridges, the kind of terrain where echoes travel faster than bullets. Civilians watched us from ridge huts, their eyes carrying histories older than our flag. My task was simple: record negotiations, note non-combatant movement. My purpose was not simple. I scanned for footprints not yet erased. A village known only by grid coordinates, we met elders beneath a warped mulberry tree. They spoke Pashto. Our interpreter translated. Insurgents crossed here last night. East Ridge, not ours, men with different uniforms. They shot at nothing. Frightened the goats, men with different uniforms. I made a note. Later I checked logs. No U.S. or coalition units scheduled within 20 miles. I flagged the report. Major Henson dismissed it. Locals confuse everything. They see helmets, assume all foreign, leave it. But the phrase clung, different uniforms. I circled it twice. One evening. After hours, I accessed locked mission files tied to Davis's operations overseas. Some required clearance I could bypass, some did not. I found them. Dates overlapping my brother's final deployment, unit references obscured, casualty rosters redacted. Fog of war, repeated, nearly identical to newer logs. Cut copy Barry, my breath tightened. I scrolled until my vision blurred. Then I saw it, a name, when I had never spoken aloud. Corporal Lewis Hartman. Listed MIA, no recovered remains. Attached to the same convoy as Michael Brooks. I closed my eyes. Michael was never supposed to be alone. There were others. Why had we never known their names? I searched for incident reports. Nothing. Just a sheet marked final loss. No witnesses. No inquiry. I checked for Hartman's file. It had been deleted, almost clean, except for one ghost. A pending request for reinvestigation left open, unsigned. Dated 3 weeks after my brother's death. The officer requesting it was unknown, but the digital ID code belonged to Colonel Malcolm Davis. That was when I knew he had been there, not rumor, not assumption. Digital signature. He was tied to the same event that ended my brother's life, and yet his record made no mention of that deployment. It had been removed, scrubbed. Why erase it unless there was something to hide? The first crack had opened. I printed what I found. I folded the pages, tucked them into the inner lining of my uniform. Evidence is worthless unless it survives you. That night, I walked outside the perimeter, watched the mountains bleed into dusk. The horizon flickered with distant fire. War looked peaceful from far away. That is its greatest lie. I held the watch to my ear. Nothing. It never ticked, yet I swear I heard something. A pulse, not of time, of insistence. War does not kill truth. It only delays it. The next morning, word spread of an ambush on Route Dahlia. A patrol hit by small arms, 2 wounded, 1 dead. We gathered for debrief. Henson moved through details with robotic cadence. Clean. Ordered, but Sergeant Kane interrupted. That was no ambush. That was crossfire confusion. Witnesses contradicted logs, conflicting statements, confusion, complication, all familiar words. I requested access to helmet cam footage. Denied. I sought medevac transcripts, redacted, pieces missing from places where pain should be. Major Henson pulled me aside. You were sent here to observe, not interfere. This is forward operations, not a philosophy seminar. I met his gaze. If observation reveals a wound, do you let it bleed? He hesitated. Then he said what men in uniform often do when confronted with responsibility. That is above our pay grade, below conscience. That night I dreamed of footsteps running through dust. My brother's voice, faint, I could not reach him. I woke with my nails dug into my palm, blood on the sheets. Someone knocked. I opened the door to find Private Morales, young. Barely 20, eyes too old. He looked at my wrist, at the watch. He hesitated, then spoke. I know that time. I froze. What? 1427. My uncle served with Brooks. He talked about him. He said it happened quick, the way people say mercy or cruelty. He swallowed. You are looking in the right place, ma'am. Just be careful. Men like Davis wear armor made of influence, not Kevlar. Why are you telling me this? Because I was taught to honor the fallen, and some of them are still waiting. He disappeared before I could speak again. I went to the mirror, looked at the woman staring back. Eyes no longer quiet, I whispered to Michael, I found someone who remembers. The next day, I submitted a restricted request to JAG for confirmation of Colonel Davis's foreign deployments between 2004 and 2005. It bounced back, no record found. I filed a secondary request through NATO archives, denied. I entered personnel logs, cross-referenced unit numbers, dates, air transport manifests. I found it, passenger roster. Classified, 11 names, 12th entry, redacted. It was his. He had removed himself from his own past. In that moment, the question changed. It was no longer what happened to my brother. It became who decided which parts of him would be erased. That was when they came for me. 2 officers arrived in the intel bay. Quiet, intent, orders in hand. Captain Brooks, you are being reassigned to Advanced Field Attachment. Forward Recon, Kunar Province. Effective immediately, I asked no questions. I packed. I slipped the documents into my rucksack, and when I tightened the watch on my wrist, it cut into my skin hard enough to bleed. Bloodline, it is not inherited. It is chosen, and I had chosen mine. If this story reaches you, remember this. Some transfers are not deployment, they are disposal, but a buried soldier is still a soldier, and I was not done fighting. War has a way of blurring the days until you cannot tell sunrise from surrender. In Kunar Province, time was measured not by hours but by impact, incoming, outgoing, the silence in between. My transfer orders placed me with a forward reconnaissance attachment, an uneasy fit for an intelligence officer. The soldiers there lived on tension and muscle memory. They did not ask why I arrived. They assumed my presence was someone else's mistake. I learned their names slowly. Corporal Jensen, face carved by exhaustion. Staff Sergeant Fry, a man who joked too loud to hide the tremor in his hands. And Private Morales, the silent one who watched everything. They viewed me with the kind of politeness reserved for chaplains and ghosts, useful but not expected to survive. Our outpost sat carved into the rock, an exposed wound overlooking the valley. Wind howled through it at night, rattling tin and bone. I worked inside a communications tent, piecing together intercepted radio fragments and movement reports. Every evening, I updated operational threat grids no one read. Out here, doctrine bowed to instinct. 3 weeks passed before his name returned to me. Davis. We received orders from the battalion, coordinated strike on suspected insurgent compound near the village of Sarkani. Davis himself had assumed field oversight for the mission, flown in under the guise of observational command. When I saw him step out of the helicopter, pristine uniform pressed against Afghan dust, I felt heat rise behind my ribs. He did not acknowledge me, but his presence did. He walked through our outpost like a man inspecting real estate he already owned. He gathered the platoon in the main clearing, boots crunching against rock. We move at 0400. Intel confirms high-value target. Civilians are negligible. The word dropped like shrapnel. I opened my mouth. Sir, civilian presence has not been independently verified. Recon drone showed. He cut me off with a glance. You are here as technical support, Captain. Do not confuse field work with file work. The briefing continued. My warning dissolved like breath. I studied the map. Coordinates were wrong. The compound marked was not isolated. It bordered dwellings, goat pens. Someone's life. I pulled Morales aside after. I asked about prior patrols in the area. He swallowed. Locals use that compound as shelter during storms. Kids sometimes sleep near the east wall. I moved to report it formally. The operations log room was locked. Davis had secured it. He anticipated opposition and sealed it out. In the hours before dawn, soldiers locked and loaded, rifles checked, radios clipped. I approached Davis directly. Sir, request mission delay pending civilian verification. He did not raise his voice, yet his words carried the weight of a gavel. Captain Brooks, you are relieved of advisory authority. Stand down. He turned his back. Authority is a fragile thing. Break it and you are disobedient. Question it and you are insubordinate, but remain silent and you become complicit. I did not stand down. I walked to the tactical board and circled the entry coordinates with a red grease marker. Lives present, reassessment required. The room hushed. Jensen stared. Fry's jaw tightened. No one spoke. No one erased it. Davis entered minutes later. His gaze fell on the board. For a breath, I saw something shift in his eyes. No doubt. Calculation, we move. He ordered it anyway. The convoy descended at 0410. Engines growled like restrained fury. I remained at the outpost, headset on, heart pounding to the rhythm of rotors. My voice was off the channel. I had been cut from comms, disconnected from consequence, yet chained to its outcome. Minutes later, the first shots crackled through static, then screams, then chaos, contact unknown, incoming from the south, civilians in the open. Command, this is Bravo, do we engage? Command, static swallowed them. I bolted from the tent, climbed the ridge, binoculars pressed to my face. Smoke mushroomed from the village, shadows scrambled, screams carried on wind, flames licked the sky. I could not tell soldiers from civilians. That is the truth of certain wars. No uniform, no mercy. The convoy limped back hours later. Silence clung to them like ash. 3 dead, 2 wounded, blood crusted on camo. No one met my eyes. Davis walked at the front, chin high, boots clean. He approached me. You will write nothing of this. Mission engaged hostile force. Civilian casualties were minimal. Minimal. I tasted iron. You knew, I said. His voice was flat. You endangered the mission by undermining command. The report he filed named me as a source of confusion, accused me of hesitating relay, implied my interference delayed orders. I was marked for inquiry. In war, blame seeks the living. I was returned to Bagram under investigation, awaiting article review, stripped of field access. Confined to quarters inside a plywood room with peeling paint. They called me a traitor. I did not protest. I was too tired to explain what integrity costs. News traveled quickly. Officers I had briefed weeks prior walked past without acknowledgement. Conversations died when I entered the hall. No one asked for my account. The army does not need your words if it already has your fate. At night, I sat on the bunk, watch in hand, staring at 1427, asking questions without expecting answers. That was when it happened. The second hand twitched, just once, almost imperceptible, but it moved. For the first time since my brother's death, time inside it shifted. It should have been impossible. It might have been an illusion, but it moved. Justice does not die, it waits. The next evening, a quiet knock at my door. I opened it to find Private Morales, face pale, eyes unblinking. He held something in his fist. I should not be here, ma'am. He extended his hand, a flash drive, small, black, worn from being held too hard. His voice trembled. It is real orders, audio and command feed. I pulled it from comms before they wiped it. You were not wrong. I stared at him. Why? His throat tightened. Someone has to remember what really happened. Before I could reply, he stepped back into the hall. This never happened. He disappeared. Inside my hands. Evidence pulsed like a heartbeat. The truth was now tangible, dangerous, and heavy. I locked the door and stood still, holding the flash drive like a detonator. It was light in my palm, yet I could feel the weight of every life contained within it, not just the dead. The living too, those who hid, those who lied, those who feared. Evidence does not free you, it shows you, it binds you to action. I plugged it into my field laptop, heart pounding with the stubborn rhythm of a war drum. The file opened with a crackle of static, voices. I recognized them instantly. The mission feed, squad channel, command override, Davis, hold position, confirm civilian absence. Unverified, civilians on the east wall, children, proceed anyway, directive stands, suppress if necessary, no fog, no confusion, no split-second panic. It was an order, deliberate, calculated. He did not hesitate, he did not misjudge, he chose. The clip ended with screams, then silence. A silence that did not belong to war, but to the record, the kind carved by omission, intentional, clean. I closed the laptop. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Rage is a quiet thing. It sits behind your ribs and waits. I could have sent it right then, to JAG, to the Inspector General, to every major news outlet with a whistleblower channel, but exposure is not justice. Early truth can be strangled by power. I needed timing, precision, strategy. I chose silence. It felt like betrayal. Not of them, of myself. I had vowed never to swallow the truth, yet here I was doing so deliberately. Sometimes restraint is not surrender. It is my aim. The inquiry against me began within days. Formal charges pending conduct review, allegations, interference with command, disobedience, compromise of mission integrity. I was summoned not as a soldier, but as an accused. The room was sterile, a single table, 2 officers in pressed uniforms. They did not greet me. One read from a prepared statement. You are under review for conduct unbecoming. How do you plead? I remained silent. They repeated the question. How do you plead? I answered with the only truth they could not distort. I have nothing to plead. A flicker of annoyance crossed their faces. They expected defense, explanations, desperation. I offered none. Words can be twisted. Silence, when chosen, is unassailable. I was dismissed pending final determination. It could take weeks, months, enough time for them to rewrite history, enough time for me to prepare its correction. Life under accusation is a peculiar cage. You can walk, eat, sleep, but everything you do is observed, interpreted, recorded. I returned to my quarters each night and listened to the watch. Every night I touched its glass and waited for the second hand to move again. It never did. Perhaps that tiny twitch had been a trick of my exhausted mind, or perhaps it had been a warning. Not yet. Morales passed me in corridors sometimes, never speaking, but our eyes met. That was enough. I was not alone in what I carried. War is filled with witnesses who never testify, but witnesses, like evidence, only matter when the moment comes. One evening I stood outside watching helicopters ascend against a molten sky. Their rotors thumped like giant heartbeats. A chaplain passed by and paused. "You look like someone praying without believing." I glanced at him. "I'm not praying." He nodded. "Then maybe you're listening." Listening, yes. But not to God as a consequence. That night I dreamed of my brother, not the memory, the voice. He stood in the desert watching me. I asked him what I should do. He said nothing. When I woke up, I understood. The dead do not guide us. They wait to see if we will carry what they could not. The army delayed my proceedings. Bureaucracy is a shield for the powerful. Accusations against me lingered like smoke without fire. Rumors filled their place. Some said I had panicked under fire. Others whispered treason. No one asked for the truth. Truth costs too much. Morales approached me once more in the mess tent. He did not sit, just stood near, tray in hand. "They're trying to bury it, ma'am. Everything." They locked comms audit, moved files. I replied quietly, "I know." He nodded. "I'll keep watching." He turned to leave. I stopped him with one question. "Why are you risking this?" He did not turn back. "Because someone has to remember." After that, he avoided me. Distance is its own armor. As weeks passed, the outpost shifted. New soldiers rotated in, old ones left with scars or silence. I was reassigned to domestic duty, filing daily briefs no one read, a purgatory in plain sight. Some nights I replayed the audio, not to punish myself, to keep focus sharp. Righteous fury can decay into self-pity if not disciplined. I was not seeking pity. I was sharpening. I mailed nothing home. My father did not call. My mother sent a postcard of a lake, no words on the back. Some families drown in grief, others become deserts. When my article hearing notice finally came, it was not valid. It was an axis, destiny shifting. I was instructed to appear at Fort Myers, pending removal or reprimand. My reputation would be decided by officers who had never set foot in Sarkani, men who would weigh my silence against Davis's record, a war hero with 2 decades untarnished service. I folded the flash drive in cloth, secured it inside my dress uniform pocket. Then I removed the watch. I held it in both hands, 1427. I whispered to it, "Not yet, but soon." There is a moment before battle when everything stills, not externally, internally. I felt that stillness, not dread, not hope, alignment. When I boarded the flight back to the States, no one saluted. I did not expect them to. I was not returning victorious. I was returning armed. If you are wondering why I did not strike then, why I did not scream the truth before the council, you do not understand war. In war, you do not fire at shadows. You wait for your target to turn. The world would soon turn, and when it did, I would be aiming. I returned to American soil under a sky that felt wider than I remembered. The air smelled different too, thick with pavement and routine, untouched by dust or fire. Yet I carried Afghanistan with me, tucked inside my breast pocket in the shape of a flash drive. I did not step off that plane as a soldier returning home. I stepped off as a witness carrying the verdict. Fort Myers awaited me with polished floors and watchful eyes. No handshakes, no escort. A clerk handed me a docket with my name on it. Hearing pending. Character review. I signed nothing. Words hold power. I had already learned which ones can be used against you. They housed me in officer quarters. Clean room, blank walls. It felt like a staging area, not a home. Outside my window, the flag at headquarters waved in a practiced rhythm. To most, it symbolized freedom. To me, it asked a question no one dared answer. Whose truth does it protect? I resumed wearing my uniform daily, not out of loyalty, out of necessity. Armor is not always metal. Sometimes it is cloth and posture. I moved through hallways where whispers followed like contrails. Some pitied me, some condemned me, none approached. Cowardice often walks in silence. It was in that isolation that I learned Davis had been nominated for a Distinguished Service Medal, the same man whose order had ignited a village. The same man preparing to receive applause for valor crafted in fiction. They were planning to immortalize him. Rage is not loud, it pools, it becomes deliberate. I opened my drawer and retrieved the flash drive, set it beside the paused weight of Michael's watch. The living and the dead, truth and time. If they were going to elevate him, they would have to stand on the graves he made. I would be there to name each one. I began writing, not an accusation, a record. Memorandum for record, title, Operation Sarkani. Summary of facts under Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order, supporting evidence attached, classified recording, timestamp log, names of the deceased, names of living witnesses, no adjectives, no speculation. Facts do not need dramatics, their power is in precision. At 1,427 hours in the afternoon, I paused. The watch stared back at me. Frozen second. Frozen truth. For the first time, I wrote his name inside a report. Corporal Michael Brooks, Kia, inquiry incomplete. The Army may not have acknowledged him, but I would. The next obstacle was not law, it was fear. Who would stand alongside a soldier already tarnished by accusation? Who would risk association? Many watched. One stepped forward. Sergeant Maria Torres. She entered my room unannounced one evening. She had flown in from Bragg. Her eyes were sharper than I remembered. I heard, they're decorating him. I nodded once. She set a dossier on my bed, complaints, formal and informal, sexual harassment, career retaliation, all filed against Colonel Davis, all buried. He ruined 3 women's careers, 2 left the service. One tried to self-harm, I stayed, I kept everything. For what, I don't know, maybe this, our eyes locked. Soldiers fight enemies, veterans hunt ghosts. I opened her files, cross-referenced dates, locations, patterns aligned like coordinates on a map. He did not just manipulate missions, he manipulated records, histories, people. Some would call it moral rot, I call it architecture. Power built by omission. Together, we drafted the submission to the Inspector General. We encrypted the package with 3 signatures. Mine, Torres, redacted witness A. Morales. He could not sign visibly, but his truth breathed through every log. When it was done, Torres sat back. What if they bury it? I met her gaze, then we dig it back up. The night before I sent it, I dreamt again, this time not Michael, of the village, smoke, screams, but in the dream I stood in the center. Unarmed, unafraid, I looked upward and shouted one word, witness. I woke at dawn, I pressed send. The war had changed battlefields, weeks passed with no response. That is the nature of systems built to protect themselves. When drowned in truth, they do not answer, they absorb. Absence replaced denial. Torres and I waited. Then came the day, the ceremony. They planned it in full dress. Grand atrium, flags draped, cameras prepared. Citation drafted on gold-trimmed parchment. Distinguished Service Medal to Colonel Malcolm Davis for exceptional gallantry and leadership under fire. I wore my uniform, polished my boots, placed the watch in my pocket, not on my wrist. Some symbols must witness, not participate. I entered quietly, taking the rear of the hall. Officers lined the aisles, ribbons shining under chandeliers. I searched faces. Not one held doubt. He entered to applause. Davis had never looked more decorated. Medals across his chest, silver in his hair. He walked like a war he had already won. I did not blink. The citation began. The narrator's voice boomed. Words like courage, sacrifice, valor. Each syllable felt like another shovel of dirt over the dead. Then the screen behind him lit, not with glory, with accusation. At first, no one understood. Grainy footage, audio distortion, a village in chaos, civilians fleeing, orders shouted. Hold fire, civilians present, proceed anyway, suppress if necessary. It was his voice. Unmistakable, cold, commanding, someone gasped. Another whispered his name, his shoulders stiffened. He turned, eyes wide. I saw it then, the first crack in his armor. That was the moment military police moved. The master of ceremonies stopped reading mid-sentence. Confusion spiraled. An MP approached him. Sir, you need to come with us. Before he spoke, someone near the stage dropped something. His medal, the one intended for his chest. It hit the floor with a metallic ring. In that exact second, something else fell from my pocket, Michael's watch. They struck the marble almost in unison, 2 medals, 2 legacies, one false, one true. The sound was small, but it was the loudest justice I had ever heard. The ceremony dissolved as if someone had cut power to the entire hall. What began with rehearsed applause ended in stunned paralysis. No one clapped, no one spoke. Eyes drifted from the stage to the screen and then to the man standing beneath it, a decorated officer suddenly stripped of narrative. Davis did not move. For a long second, he simply stood there with his back straight, as if posture alone might protect him. But a lie cannot wear a uniform forever. The moment his voice echoed again from the speakers, giving the order to suppress regardless of civilian presence, his legacy cracked in half. Military police approached without haste, moving with the calm of men who already knew their orders. Davis tried to speak, but authority had abandoned him. He reached for defense, insisting he had acted under engagement protocol, but the officer beside him ended it with a single phrase. This is an Article 92 investigation. There was no anger in the MP's tone, only finality. In that instant, Davis was no longer colonel. He was a case file. As they escorted him away, someone near the front dropped the medal intended for his chest. It struck the marble floor with a sharp metallic ring. At that same moment, without intention, I felt Michael's watch slip from my pocket. It fell beside the medal, glass down, frozen at 1427. 2 medals, 2 legacies, one earned in blood. One built on burial. The sound was small, but it was the loudest justice I had ever heard. They cleared the hall. Officers filed out in fractured silence, unsure whether to leave quickly or stay and bear witness. Maria Torres remained in the doorway, arms folded, gaze anchored on me. She did not smile. She gave a single nod, not of celebration, but recognition. This is not the end, it said. This is where it truly begins. I stood alone until an usher approached and asked me to remain for questioning. Not as a courtesy, not as a warning, as acknowledgement. The system had recognized there was something to hear. In military culture, silence is often used to erase, but once they ask you to stay, silence becomes invitation. In a private chamber, a senior colonel entered. He carried no papers. He did not sit. His eyes studied me with the caution of someone weighing consequence against conscience. "Captain Brooks, do you understand what you have done?" His voice carried no accusation, only gravity. I held his gaze. "Do you?" He exhaled through his nose. "You violated classification channels. You bypassed chain of command. You may face court-martial." I did not look away. Procedure was used to bury truth. If truth had a path, I would have taken it. He did not argue. Instead, he said quietly, "We are opening a full investigation. Davis will face tribunal. Others may follow. This goes beyond one man." When he left, I felt neither victory nor fear, but a shift. Until that moment, I had been defending myself. Now I was prosecuting silence. Word traveled quickly, not about what I had revealed, but about what I had disrupted. Some called me reckless, others called me disgraceful, but one young lieutenant passing me in the corridor whispered a single word, relentless. It stayed with me more than any accusation. I was notified that my status had changed, no longer under accusation, no longer confined to quarters. I had been reassigned to witness. It is a strange thing to be both suspect and source in the same institution. They did not apologize. The military does not apologize, it reclassifies. At night, I returned to my barracks. I did not sleep. I opened the flash drive again. I listened to the recording, not to relive it, to remind myself that justice does not arrive with applause. It arrives with proof. Proof is patient. Proof waits for courage to catch up. I visited Quantico 2 days later. Section 10, Training Fatalities. Grave markers small and unadorned. I found Michael's name and knelt. I did not bring flowers. I brought the watch. I placed it against the stone. You were not abandoned. I did not cry. I felt something deeper. The end of blame, the beginning of burden. As I walked back toward the gates, a recruit saluted me. He said nothing, but I saw it in his eyes. Permission not to follow orders, to question them. It was in that moment I understood that this was no longer about Colonel Davis. It was about every soldier who had been taught that obedience was honor, even when it demanded blindness. Before I left base, I received one last message. An email, no signature, no rank, just 6 words. "We are ready to testify." I closed my eyes. The war was no longer overseas. It had come home, and I was no longer just a soldier. I had become record. And record does not fade. The fall of a man like Davis does not happen with one sound. It happens in echoes, in hearings, in recorded testimonies, in the quiet resignation of officers who once saluted him without question. His arrest was not an ending, it was a summons for all of us who had survived under his command to answer one question without rank attached to it. What is honor if it is not truth? I received official notification of military tribunal proceedings 2 weeks after the ceremony. The file labeled him now only as Respondent Davis. The uniform had been removed, the rank was stripped, his career is no longer protected by commendations but encircled by inquiry. He had been relieved of command and placed under legal custody pending Article 32 hearing. But this hearing was not about his guilt. His guilt was evident. It was about something larger, what the Army would recognize as true history. In the days leading to my testimony, I moved through Fort Myers like a shadow with a name. Some saluted, some turned away. A few approached quietly as if proximity itself were courage. One officer murmured as I passed, "You did what we all saw but never said." I did not feel pride. I felt weight. Praise is light. Responsibility is not. The tribunal chamber was held in a room designed for reverence. Dark wood, high walls, flags anchored in each corner unmoving. A long central table divided those who judged from those who answered. I took my seat not as a defendant but as a witness. Yet my pulse beat with the same steady thunder as it had in Afghanistan. War zones change landscapes, not heart rates. They brought him in. Davis entered without escort, guarded only by the consequences that now trailed behind him. He no longer wore the hardened command face. He wore a mask more dangerous. Conviction, not of innocence, of entitlement. He took his place. He never looked my way until the moment they read the charge. Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order. Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order. Only then did his eyes lock onto mine. He held my gaze and spoke under his breath, positioned so only I could hear. "You think you won because you are loud." I did not blink. I won because I stopped being silent. Testimony began. Witnesses were called in sequence. Torres spoke first. Her voice carried the calm of a woman who had spent years rehearsing truth in a locked room, waiting for the day she could speak it aloud. She detailed retaliation, career sabotage. Reports dismissed, complaints buried. Each time she said his name, the room flinched. Next came Morales. He did not give full details. He gave enough to confirm transmission logs, enough to solidify the chain of command deviation, enough to prove that the recording was not anomaly. It was a directive. When my turn came, I stood. My boots echoed against the floor. I recounted Sarkani not as a story, but as sequence. No adjectives, no rage, just facts. Facts stripped of narrative burn hotter because they force listeners to supply their own conscience. I played the recording again, suppress if necessary. The silence after was not shocking. It was a shame. Finally, they questioned me. "Why did you not immediately report this through secure channels?" I answered plainly, "I did. The system deleted it." "And why did you not remain silent after that?" "Because silence would have made me complicit." One of the tribunal members, a general, leaned forward. "What outcome are you seeking, Captain Brooks?" I held his gaze, a record, one that cannot be erased. There were no further questions. They recessed for consideration. I was escorted to a waiting chamber. Torres sat beside me. She did not speak. We did not need to. This was not suspenseful. This was the aftermath. When they called us back, the flags did not move. The panel stood. The findings are as follows. Allegations against Captain Aaron Brooks are dismissed with full restoration of status and honor. Recommendations for commendation to follow. The words settled slow as snowfall. Full restoration, status, honor. I felt no triumph, only release, not outward, inward, like a door unbolting beneath ribs, but the room was not done. The general addressed me directly. "Captain Brooks, you should know that additional matters are under review, sealed operations." Ghost Falcon. The air tightened. A colonel turned. "Captain Brooks, are you the same Aaron Brooks from Operation Ghost Falcon?" Murmurs rippled. Heads turned. I stood still. Ghost Falcon, a name I had not heard in 10 years, the mission with no record, the one buried without casualty logs, the one I survived but was never listed on. I did not answer. I did not need to. Recognition spread like ignition. Officers rose to their feet, not all at once, not coordinated, one by one. Reverent, not applause, respect. I did not smile. Some truths are not spoken, they are witnessed. When the tribunal adjourned, the room did not empty. Not immediately. Those who remained stood not as audience, but as witnesses, a distinction I had come to understand deeply. Applause did not follow. Applause belongs to celebration. This moment belonged to reckoning. Officers approached in silence. Some offered nods. Others simply looked at me, their faces marked not by admiration, but recognition. They had not applauded my courage. They had confronted their own fear. That is the quiet revolution truth demands. Outside the chamber, the air felt strangely thin, as if the building itself had been holding its breath. Torres joined me in the hallway. She rested her hand on my shoulder, not in comfort, but in acknowledgement. "You did not just win," she said. "You changed the rules." I shook my head. "No, I forced them to read them." Her eyes softened. "That is how rules are changed." She walked away, her duty shifting to those who would follow. Mine was not over, not yet. I was instructed to pick up my reinstatement papers at headquarters, the same building where I had once walked as an accused. Now, as I entered, young soldiers stepped aside, not out of deference to rank, out of something heavier, awareness. A private person stood at the reception desk. He hesitated, then said, "I saw everything." I met his eyes. "No, you saw enough. The rest you must decide on your own." He nodded slowly, as if receiving orders he would carry for life. Inside a small administrative office, an aide presented my new file. My record had been restored, my status reinstated, my commendation under review. The Army had corrected my paper trail, but paper cannot capture what has been carved beneath the scar. As I reached for the file, my hand paused. The watch. It lay in my inner pocket, silent as always. I placed it gently atop the folder for a moment. 14:27, frozen between breath and heartbeat. That night I returned to my quarters. They had not changed. The room remained a sterile square of institutional furniture and government-issued quiet, but I had changed. There are wars that end with a ceasefire, others end with choice. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the small box on my nightstand. Inside lay the items I had carried like burdens and kept like weapons. The flash drive, the memorandum, the folded flag pin from my brother's funeral, and the watch. I lifted it with both hands, the way one handles something sacred. For 10 years, I believed it marked an ending, his death, my vow, our unfinished time. But as I looked at it now, I felt something shift. This was not a clock. This was a verdict waiting to be overturned. Time had not stopped that day. I closed my fingers around it and whispered to the silence, "I am done standing still." The morning of my formal reinstatement, I reported to the reviewing officer. He stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back. There was no ceremony, no speech. He stamped my file and said, "Captain Brooks, the Army is prepared to reintegrate you wherever you choose to serve." I did not sit. I did not salute. I asked only one question. "Has the investigation into Ghost Falcon been opened?" He blinked in surprise. "How did you?" I met his gaze. "Because I was there." He did not deny it. He did not confirm it, but he gave a single nod. Unofficially, yes, there are still gaps in that report. Names missing, events redacted. "We may ask for your statement." My answer was simple. "I will give it, but only if it will be kept." He exhaled, quiet, firm. "It will." Outside headquarters, the wind lifted, carrying the flag overhead into motion. I reached into my pocket and held the watch once more. My thumb brushed the glass, and then it happened. I felt it before I saw it. A faint click, a tremor along the minute hand. 14:27 shifted to 14:28. A single second, a single mercy. After a decade of stillness, time moved. I did not gasp. I did not weep. I closed my eyes and inhaled. Some part of me had been waiting for permission to live beyond him. That permission had never been denied. I had denied it to myself. Vengeance ends when truth is told, but healing begins when truth is accepted. My war against silence had ended. My life beyond it had not yet begun. Weeks later, I left Fort Myers carrying nothing but a sealed envelope and a plain duffel. I turned in my uniform, not in disgrace, in completion. Service is not always bound by continued enlistment. Sometimes it continues in fights no longer sanctioned by chain of command. I moved north to a town near the edge of pine country, a place with no salutes, no formations, just gravel roads and a wide sky. I bought a small cabin with a porch facing the east. Sun. The direction of beginnings. I planted nothing. I waited, and then one day they came. Veterans, women, some who served under Davis, some who had stories no report had ever captured. They did not knock. They arrived like survivors do, cautious, armed with silence. I did not ask them to speak. I opened the door and made room. There are battlefields without borders. This was one. I keep the watch on my mantle now. It runs some days, stop others, but it no longer rules me. I wear no uniform. I command no troops. And yet every week someone writes to me, signs their name, and ends with the same 3 words, "I was there." They do not mean Sarkani. They mean the place beyond obedience, the threshold of truth. If you are listening, understand this. I did not bring down a man. I broke open a silence. And inside that silence, thousands of voices were waiting. I do not speak for them. I listen. I do not fight for them. I stand beside them. My name is Aaron Brooks, Captain United States Army, retired, recipient of no official monument, keeper of one. And I am no longer waiting for time to move. I am moving with it. I left the army without a ceremony. No folded flag, no final salute, just a quiet signature on a line that once defined my life. I drove north until the bases disappeared and the land turned wide and silent. Montana, a place where the sky does not judge and mountains keep their promises. I bought a small ranch with creaking floors and a porch that faced the sunrise. I did not come here to disappear. I came to listen. Women began to arrive, not all at once. Not invited, they came with scars hidden under flannel sleeves and questions they were never allowed to ask in uniform. I did not teach them how to forget. I taught them how to speak, how to reclaim a voice that had been trained to salute before it could scream. There were no ranks here, only names, only truths. One winter morning, a package arrived at my door. Inside lay a medal I had never applied for and a handwritten note. Ma'am, I re-enlisted because of you. I believe in this uniform again. It was signed by Morales, a soldier who had once whispered truth into my hands like contraband. I held the medal, but it was the letter I felt in my chest. I reached for the watch, Michael's watch, the same one frozen at 14:27. It was still running. It had been running for some time. I just had not looked. I fastened it around my wrist and felt no weight, only rhythm, only life. I used to think silence made me strong. Now I know strength is what breaks the silence. This is military revenge. We do not hunt people down. We bring the truth back home. If you have ever been silenced, subscribe. Your story may be the next one we carry.